one-on-one tayo next time after my talk. And of course, again, good afternoon sa lahat ng mga participants dito. I think hindi ako masyado sali na pagdating sa multi-grade. And I'm sure, siguro meron din ilan dito sa inyo na nakikita ko na rin from time to time, especially yung mga supervisors dito. Baka nakikita ko na rin po kayo sa ibang mga activities natin sa teaching and learning dito. So, yeah, I'm very glad to be here and to share what I can about formative assessment, especially in the context of the use of learning resources like self-learning modules and even learning activity sheets. All right, so first things first, let me just show you this very interesting figure. Okay, so this shows you a comparison of PISA and TIMSS scores in the Pacific since 2000 for PISA and 2003 for the TIMSS. Please take note that the data or the distribution you're seeing here is based on such assessments, and I'm sure you're familiar already with the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, and the TIMSS, which is the French International Math and Science Fund. So for this figure na nakikita nyo, when World Bank published this figure, the only data that we have during that time was on TIMSS. Okay, because remember, we only participated in the PISA noong 2019. Diba? Okay? And as you may have known already, especially those who are well-versed in math and science education in the Philippines, we only participated, so the last time we participated at TIMSS fund is 2008. Okay? At maliit lang yung sample. Malaki-laking sample was in 2000. And so nung rounds na yun, or the surveys na yun, we really lag behind other countries. So as what you can see here right now in this diagram, let me just zoom this a bit para mas makita nyo. Okay, ganyan na lang. I hope you can see this very clearly now. And notice that the Philippines is right here. And if you are well-versed properties of a normal curve, alam niyo naman ang ibig sabihin kapag nandito sa part na to, tama? Yan, hindi lang siya basta below average yung performance. Talagang mababa pa talaga. Okay? So, this line represents the average score of the below average performing countries, based on the PISA and TIMSS data I mentioned. This line here represents the average score of the above average performing countries, which include Vietnam and some jurisdictions in China, right? And then here, itong purple na to, the line, represents the average scores of the high-performing countries. And we all know that Singapore, South Korea, Japan, Chinese Taipei, Macau, and Hong Kong are perennial powerhouses when it comes to mathematics and science performance. Okay? In the PISA, same din, no? Singapore has been very dominant in the three areas of math, science, and reading. Okay? That's why they continue to dominate, not only academically, but they're really very good in terms of a lot of aspects. Of course, when we compare Singapore and the Philippines, ang laki ng pagkakaiba sa sa geographical makeup pa lang. Okay? Because again, Singapore is much smaller than the Philippines, obviously. Okay? But going back to my point here, if we look at the difference between these lines here, we can see that the average score of the below average performing countries is 106 points behind the above average performing countries. So what does 106 points mean? If we consider the classroom, nagbigay ka ng certain tests sa mga students, and collect their scores. And let's say we have, out of 50 points, your highest scorer is 49 points, and the lowest scorer gets, let's say, a 30. Diba? So yung range is 19 points. But what does 19 points mean? Diba? At the classroom level, we can just say na, okay, yun lang yung difference ng highest score sa lowest score. But when it comes to international large-scale assessments like PISA and the SAT, doesn't simply mean the difference lang. Because here, from a statistical point of view, yung difference to 106 points means 3.5 years of schooling behind these above average performing countries. Meaning, a grade 5 student, let's say no, here in the Philippines, a grade 5 Filipino child, a Filipino student, is expected to perform or at least meet the expectations for a grade 5 student. Diba? Yun naman talaga dapat eh. However, because they're lagging behind already, no, it might mean that some of the students might be in grade 5, but their performance or their ability level is pang grade 2 or grade 3 lang. Again, 3.5 years behind. You get what I mean? So when we compare a grade 5 Filipino student with a grade 5 Vietnamese student, the Vietnamese student is able to perform the expectations, the targets rather, expected for a grade 5 Vietnamese student, but not for a student, even when the topics are comparable. Okay? So, why did I start this session with this figure? Because again, when we talk about assessment, you cannot isolate this from the topics of teaching and learning because assessment is an integral part of teaching and learning. It's central to teaching and learning. You cannot improve the way you teach and you cannot improve the learning outcomes of your children without proper design and use of design, implementation, and use of assessment. Okay? So, just having our students in the classroom, whether it's a physical classroom or a virtual classroom, just like yung current setup natin, or even if there's no virtual classroom at all and their classroom is physically their bedroom, di ba? Kung talagang purely modular yung learning modality ng bata, then it doesn't mean that they will learn right away. Okay? That's why we have to have some process just in place to make sure that we get enough information about whether our students are actually learning or not. In other words, itong face-to-face pa. When our children enter the school, no, pagpasok sila sa gate ng school, hindi naman automatic yan na paglabas sila ng school, wow, punong-puno na agad yung mind sila, they can do everything very well. No. If you have 100 students in a school, 100 yun a different starting point. And 100 yun a different ways of learning. No? So, I'm not talking about individual differences. So, if you're not able to address these sorts of differences, then we cannot really say that learning has been successful in the classroom. And therefore, we cannot even say that we were not actually able to teach successfully. So, before we move on any further, we have to define conceptually ano bang ibig sabihin ng distance learning. No? Kasi kaya naman lumabas yung naging matunog no, about sa SLN and then sa learning activity sheet because of the way the pandemic forced us to do distance learning. And because of the distance learning setup or the remote learning setup, yung physical separation between the teachers and the students was imposed on us. Diba? Kaya the past school year has been challenging for the teachers, for the students, and their parents, and even their other relatives. Yung sila yung tumutulong sa kanila. Or even this school year, it's possible na they're still experiencing the same challenge or challenges because of distance learning. And this kind of setup also includes the use various technologies that facilitate communication between the student and the teacher, the student and the student, and of course, right now, student to parent and parent to teacher communication. Okay? When we talk about technology, it may vary um, depending on its type. So if you consider a technology, we have low tech to high tech, no? Low tech to medium tech to high tech. And even yung mga printed na mga materials are considered low technology. Okay? But the question there is how can, because of these resources, how can we make sure that these resources are used very well and the assessments here are well designed and are in place to facilitate learning, okay, and support learning. Now, let me show you another piece of, or diagram rather, from a piece of research conducted by Cho, Kaoka, and Pisa in 2021, no, just this year. Actually, the last round of surveys they did was, I think, a few months ago, itong summer period yata, or maybe, I think, no May. Technically, it's not, it's summer in terms of season, pero not summer just in summer break. No? Kasi patapos tayo ng school year natin ng mga, ano, June. Okay? And there, we can see here that we're able to identify the various barriers to effective distance learning. No? And the major barriers that they were able to identify are the following: limited access to gadgets and internet, the child's inability to focus, and rest due to COVID-19. Okay? And it's also noteworthy that in that piece of research and in the report, they highlighted something that you can all relate with. Okay? So let me just read. They said there that paper-based modules can be as effective as other modalities if properly used. But students may find using them more difficult than other modules in the absence of close supervision by teachers and peers and or support from household members. Okay? I don't know about you, but I definitely agree with this statement because by itself, pag nakita lang natin na yung module nakapatong sa table, let's say, of course, kung nandyan lang siya at hindi ginagamit ng bata, paano mo malalaman kung effective yung material? Paano mo rin malalaman if the student or your child is able to get anything from the module unless it's open? Huh? So, if a certain material, whether it's a module or a learning activity sheet, um, designed properly, then it can only be effective if it can be properly used by the students. If there's not enough information on it, then sayang lang yung papel. Diba? Especially kung may limited number of pages lang yan and you have to um, um, you have to think about the design of your whole material. Diba? So what more pa kung yun nga kulang nga yung contents ng material, then it becomes more difficult for the students to use it. Okay? It's just na nga lang kung ano siguro, no? They have a knowledgeable other, like yung parents nila. Let's say, mataas naman yung academic background, hindi mataas yung pinag-aralan. So definitely, even if you leave so many details out from the material, then syempre yung parents, kaya niya gawa ng paraan yun to provide more support. But what about those parents or even other guardians na hindi naman nila naintindihan, for example, yung mga higher topics in science, in mathematics, or social studies, and other learning areas. If there's not enough information in the modules and needs to work on, then how can they fully support their children? So again, babalik tayo doon sa pinakauna ko kanina that having access, well, dito kasi nilagay ko enrollment, no? But siguro in a more general perspective, gaining access to these materials does not assure everyone, does not give the assurance, rather, na matututo yung bata. Again, access to these materials is different from the way these materials are being used, being designed and being used. Okay? Do we have a question? I'm not sure. Someone's opened his or her mic. Thank you. Okay. Now, So what does it take to no, to be successful during distance learning? And according to one paper, I was able to one relevant paper that I was able to gather uh, to give relation to distance learning. Pelican and colleagues and their colleagues were able to identify some factors that may affect or can affect academic success during distance learning. And one of these is self-regulated learning. Again, like na sinabi natin, self-learning module. Uh, so, kaya siya self-learning kasi pag binigay mo siya sa student, if the student is able to regulate his or her thoughts, his or her own activities, then he or she should be able to learn by himself or herself. So self-regulation skills are very important. Self-regulation strategies are very important, especially now for our children, whether they are using SLMs or LASs. Okay? And self-regulation may mean or may be demonstrated by any of the following. Number one, setting achievable goals. Can they do this? Diba? Of course, for younger children, they need the support of their parents to set their own goals pa. But of course, when they get older and they reach intermediate grades, the intermediate grades of elementary or even junior high or senior high, they should be able to set their own goals already. Okay? They should be able to manage time and task, monitor their own progress, regulate their motivation, very important also, and seek help when necessary. So they cannot do anything or they cannot proceed with a certain lesson. They should be able to ask for help already. Pwedeng sa parents, pwedeng sa friends nila, or sa classmates, or some other people na pwedeng makatulong. Then another factor is perceived competence. Yung feeling competent nila with tasks, sorry, yung feeling of competence nila with tasks and activities. It's very important for them that when they receive a material, they will see na it's not too hard for them to do. Why? Because pag sa unang basa pa lang yan, let's say page 1 pa lang, nakita nyo napakahirap ng intindihin. What do you think will happen? Definitely, they will not be motivated anymore to to turn the pages, di ba? And go through with the whole lesson if they see already that they cannot finish the task. So this is directly related with intrinsic motivation, no? Because they see something as difficult to do, they won't pursue it anymore. Okay, so these are related, and these are related also. Okay, and lastly, although this might not be positively correlated with perceived competence, but another influence, another factor that may influence academic success during remote learning is passive procrastination. And what do you mean by passive procrastination? I'm sure you're very familiar already with the concept of procrastination, but what do you mean procrastinating passively? It means delaying tasks even when faced with negative consequences. So when they see something as difficult, I'm sure baka nakarating nyo ito sa mga ano nyo, sa mga anak ninyo, no, na pag nahihirapan sila, they put it off for later. Sabi nila, ay mamaya ako na gagawin yan. Kasi alam ko paano gagawin yan eh. So, hindi siguro dahil sa katamaran lang yon. It's maybe because they're trying to avoid the task. Okay? That's called avoidance. No? So if something is very difficult to do, they put it off for later. And na-experience din natin yun as adults, di ba? Napag mahirap yung isang bagay, we put it off for later. Kasi bukas na lang, hanggang sa deadline na, bigla ka may stress, bigla mo siyang gagawin. Diba? So again, these are factors that may influence distance learning. And why am I discussing these factors? Because these are to the design of the resources that you are designing. Again, whether it is an SLM or an LAS. Okay? And actually, these are these are also related with the way we design the learning experiences of our children, even in face-to-face classroom. So it's encompassing. Hindi ko dapat dinidiscuss lang because it's distance learning, no? Because it's a period of distance learning. But rather, this is something that everyone should take note of. Whether your child is on a purely modular nasa purely modular na modality, or naka-online blended siya, or naka-digital modular siya, or whatever LTM pa yan. So this is cut across all modalities. Okay, so when a student or when your child receives a module, syempre maraming tumatakbo sa isip ng bata. Okay, pwede niyang, what is this for? Okay, last year, marami na modules, nahirapan ako, nakulangan sa tulog. So this year, eto na naman, may module na. Tapos ibigyan pa ako ng learning activity sheet. What is this for? What is this for? And what? Thank you for turning off the mic. What is this for? What are these for? And one can also think of what's in it for me. Para, okay, sige, pag tinapos ko itong ano na to, itong module na to, for what? Diba? And so what? Diba? What can I get out of this? Diba? What's in it for me? Okay? Where am I going with this? Diba? Okay, this module is 30 pages long. I already started with pages 1, 2, 3, and so on. But still, hindi clear sa akin, saan ba ako papunta? Para saan ba itong ginagawa ko na to? Where am I going with this task? Okay? And how will I accomplish this? Is this related with the previous module? If I finish this module, will this help me accomplish my my next module and so on? Okay? And other questions. So there are many questions na pwede maisip ng mga bata about this. And I'm hoping na talaga ito yung mga questions na naisip ng mga bata, no? And they're really into their learning processes. Okay? Sana hindi nila naisip na pag nakita sila ng LAS or ng SLM, ay, pabayaan ko na nga yan, iitapon ko na lang. Hopefully, hindi ganun. Okay? Although we've seen some pictures na very, very, very depressing na, very frustrating pictures in the, in social media na merong mga gumagamit ng mga modules or maybe mga LAS siguro yun, ginagawang na lang, parang pamunas, diba, pinipila siya, tapos pilang tatakip somewhere, parang gano'n. So, you don't see any value, no, dito sa mga resources natin. But the question is why? Okay? Why aren't they seeing any value, okay, in these materials? So, sa remaining time na meron ako, I hope I can finish this in 15 minutes. I'm just gonna go through with you very briefly the principles included in Defend Order number 31, Series 2020, on the interim policy on assessment and grading. Okay? And again, for some of you who have attended a previous workshop we conducted last, the end of July and the start of August, you might have seen this presentation. So, we are aiming, as I said, I am aiming to connect this with what we're doing in the context of learning activities. Okay? So, principle number 1 is that assessment should be holistic and authentic. Okay? So, it's important for us to know the purpose of what we're placing in our LAS. Okay? And we should also know the purpose of those tasks in the module. If we're going to give the LAS para magamit ng mga bata side by side, no, or in support sa mga modules, they should know the purpose of what we're giving them. Okay? So we have to look at whether it's for diagnostic purposes, or for formative purposes, or for summative purposes. Okay? And it should be able to answer the following questions. What should my students know, understand, be able to do? How can I translate the standards into specific teachable components? These are questions as a party teacher na kailangan masagot natin. What do my students already know about the topic I'm about to teach? And how can my students express what they have learned? So for example, you consider yung math standards. Okay? Please don't be surprised by showing you a lot of math examples because I will have to play to my strengths as a math specialist. So here I'm showing you a grade 6 math example here with the content and performance standards. And definitely, to start pa lang, kailangan ma-decide na ng teacher, paano ko gagawin manageable itong content and performance standards na kailangan ma-cover within this certain week or within this certain number of weeks. So it must be clear to you what the big ideas are nung standards na to. So for example, here, the big idea is Successful critical thinkers and problem solvers can use mathematical operations flexibly in a variety of situations. Notice that the big ideas do not just refer to definitions, but rather, kaya siya the big ideas at the end of this period or the end of this quarter or this year, ano dapat yung tingin ng bata dito sa set of topics na natututunan niya? Okay? Why do we learn about the four fundamental operations? Because they have to be flexible in using this in the variety of situations, especially real life situations. Okay? I hope you were able to get that. And from there, we can come up with some essential questions. Like, why do I need mathematical operations? And how are mathematical operations related to each other? So you see, kapag katingnan natin lang yung topics as just mere content or just mere topics, then isipin nyo lang siya na, bakit ituro ko yung addition kasi sinabi sa curriculum guide na kailangan ituro yung addition. But the question is why? How is addition related to subtraction? How is addition related to multiplication? How is subtraction related to division? So these are the many questions that we should be asking of ourselves as teachers, so that we can design our materials very carefully for our children to follow them. All right. So for example, here's in grade 6 na competencies for week 1. And again, basic requirements yun sa atin na even if we're teaching this grade level, and again, multi-grade tayo, so if you're teaching, let's say, grades 4, 5, and 6 in a certain class, you should be able to understand kung ano yung basic requirements ng topic na yun, sa grade 4 student mo, sa grade 5 mo, at sa grade 6 student, so that you will be able to differentiate your activities properly. Okay? Able to articulate properly the topics and the knowledge and the skills involved in these topics. Okay? So, kung ang training mo ay isang grade 5 teacher, for example, kung regular classroom to, if you're a grade 5 teacher, you should not only be knowledgeable in your grade 5 topic, but you must also be knowledgeable dun sa grade 4 topic and dun sa grade 6 topic or topics. Bakit? Kailangan ma-determine mo yung prerequisites Diba? Saan ba nanggaling yung grade 5 topic? Saan siya connected sa grade 4 or even grade 3, grade 2, grade 1? Okay? Pag tinuro ko tong topic na to, how is this related? How is this going to help my children be successful or become successful in grade 6, in 7, 8, 9, 10, even in senior high school? Okay? So meron siyang ganun forward thinking din. And also, alam mo yun dapat i-track siya previously based on the logical steps nung content na yan, nung knowledge, sorry, not only content but also the knowledge and the skills. Okay? So, when you do that, you should be able to unpack already the competencies. Okay? So here, as I showed you, naka-unpack is a week 1, and then you follow this up with week 2, and then week 3 also na naka-unpack din siya. Okay? Bakit mahalaga yun? Para makita niyo yung bigger picture nung gagawin ninyo ng mga tasks, whether formative yan or summative in nature. Okay? So for example, so ito yung target mo for 3 weeks, you should be able to come up with a performance task na mag-elicit nung knowledge and skills ng bata on these operations. Okay? And the performance task must not be isolated, or must not be devoid of context, Kasi kadalasan nakikita ko ng mga performance tasks, kino-cover nila yung content, kino-cover nila yung topics, pero I cannot see how that certain task is related to the real world. But it doesn't tell the students that when you do this should help you connect what you're learning here in the classroom or here in this material to the real world. So context is very important. It's crucial. It's central to performance tasks. Okay? Because again, performance tasks should be authentic in nature, So some of the context you might want to incorporate might be social issues like parang social solidarity as manifested in community pantries. And there are a lot of community pantries all over the Philippines. You cannot just say na ang community pantry ay hanggang sa Manila lang or sa this area lang, I've seen the distribution of community pantries around the Philippines, and they're all scattered around the Philippines. Okay, so this is applicable in all contexts. Or you might want to incorporate ano naman yan, food, di ba? Or maybe something like in sports naman, no? For example, yung recently concluded na Olympics. Pero syempre, ano na, late na kung dapat pa kayo nabang sa Olympics. So, pag-research na kayo na yung next sporting event na na involve yung Philippines will be the Southeast Asian Games, supposedly this year, but it was moved next year. Something, so may mga ganong klase ng mga context sana. Or hindi man yan, there are many others to talk about. And you can even use real-time data from the Department of Health, for example, or from the Transportation Department. Or marami kang pwedeng kuhanan yan. Okay? Kasi context may mean personal, pwedeng occupational, pwedeng scientific, pwedeng societal, pwedeng global. There are lots. Right? So again, just to emphasize, articulation is important. You must be able to do this vertically and horizontally across learning areas. That's one of the main steps when you construct formative assessments, okay? And even summative assessments. So principle number 2, as I mentioned kanina, pinahapyawan ko lang, assessment is integral in teaching and learning. And obviously, you need to assess to know what they can do, say, write, and create. No? So doon mo makikita yung mga yun. So with what they know, understand, and be able to do. Okay? So you can use that framework, yung KUT. So,
Recording in progress.
wala pong sound.
Wala nasa ng internet si Weng, magdadala lang po.
When the student gets a 1, what does a score of 1 mean? What does a score of 3 mean? What does a score of 0 mean? Okay? If a student gets a test parang perfectly, no? Lahat tama yung sagot niya, does that mean that she has mastered already the necessary competencies or the required competencies? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, why is it not a very clear cut no? Because it will depend on the way you designed the test or you design the task. If the test is too easy, then basically naka-perfect siya dahil madali yung test. It doesn't automatically mean na na-master na yan talaga yung lahat na expectations for that topic. Okay? Kasi baka mamaya nakafocus lang sa very easy na mga questions. Paano naman yung mga more challenging levels or more challenging tasks? If the students can't even do those, then delikado siya, kawawa siya pag nagpunta na siya sa next grade level. Okay? Kasi mas challenging na yung mga topics. So when we construct our formative assessment or even summative assessment, the scores or the feedback that they should be able to get must clearly tell them where they are in their learning journey, okay, within that period. Okay? What you're seeing now is a figure that the Vice Commissioner wanted to put in some details on classroom assessment. But what this figure shows you again is the important role of classroom assessment, no, in the whole business of schooling, which includes curriculum planning and design, ano to, integration of pedagogical strategies and approaches in your design. So recognizes also of the appropriate learning theories to be implemented in a certain learning episode, okay? Which will all flow into the way we design the instructional experiences and the assessment experiences for our children. So both instructional and assessment experiences may be teacher-led, peer-mediated, or even self-directed, or even parent-directed. Kita ko nasa bahay siya. Okay? Third, a variety of assessment strategies is necessary, with formative assessment taking priority to inform teaching and promote growth and mastery. This is one of the things that we have to make sure na emphasize in Deped Order number 31, that there are a lot of strategies that we can use. No? And so the teachers must make sure lang na wag palaging multiple choice lang ginagamit. Kung essay lang alam na gamitin. There are a lot of ways that we can assess or even gather evidence about our students' learning outcomes. Okay? Kahit na nasanay na tayo sa multiple choice, identification, yung mga ganun traditional na mga exercises, we have to explore other ways para makakuha tayo ng deeper information about our students, even during the pandemic. Yes, I understand it's difficult, and it's already difficult nung kahit wala pa yung pandemic. It is definitely much more difficult nowadays. So what I'm saying is, you will have to choose strategies that are manageable for you, that's manageable for your students, but they can give you the right kind of information about what your students are learning or not learning. Okay? So you have to balance formative assessment and summative assessment. But you have to, yung formative assessment, you have to be mindful of your practices in doing this. Okay? Kasi I've heard of many, parang many stories na rin last school year na yung promote to lahat ng activities doon pinapasagutan. And then I found out that there's one teacher na ang ginagawa daw ay lahat yun recorded at kasama sa grade. Walang problema kung lahat na nasa module ay i-record. Okay? But if everything becomes part of the grade, yun yung may question mark na tayo dyan. Why? Kasi remember, SLMs are formative in nature. Okay? Your LASs might also be formative in nature. There might be other parts lang there na summative. No? So again, you can record everything. It's just your way of monitoring your students' progress. But not everything should be graded. Kasi may mga aspects, may mga certain tasks na dapat pang-practice pa lang ng student, no? Para ma-facilitate lang yung yung thinking niya about yung topic. You cannot expect them to master everything right away just because you gave them a module or you just gave them a learning activity sheet, no? Or steps of learning activity sheet. Okay? Yung iba dapat na task doon must be supportive only of learning. Okay? And then saka na yung summative assessment. If yung necessary steps were already taken by the student towards that period, no, for the summative assessment. Okay? And there are ways that you can do this both formally and informally. Right. So I mentioned earlier, that formative assessment should be able to answer three questions. Learner going, where is the learner right now, and how will the learner get there? And in the definite order, we were able to, or we identified there five key formative assessment strategies. So, of course, due to lack of time, I won't be able to elaborate each one here in this session. But of course, um, you have all the time to read the author and even the accompanying classroom assessment research book that you have here. Okay, but my point lang here is when you do formative assessment, it should be a collaborative effort between the teacher and the parent or and the guardian, the learners and their classmates, and getting enough information to answer these three questions. Okay? So in the different order, you will see there also a variety of strategies that you can use. And I'm sure some of these na pwedeng ma-incorporate sa inyong mga learning activity sheets and also sa mga self-learning modules. While some of these might be more appropriate when it comes to communicating with children. Okay? So you have to be you have to choose very carefully which ones to use according to the learning modality and also yung syempre appropriateness ng student. Okay? You've got a lot of suggestions here. Just have to download and read the O31. Unfortunately, we've been receiving reports na natapos na yung school year last year na meron pa rin daw iba na they were not even aware that there's Definite Order number 31. So that's very surprising and saddening at the same time. So that should be the responsibility then of the supervisors and the principals to make sure that your teachers understand the policy, okay? And help them implement this at the classroom level. All right, so I'm going to show you now some sample pages in a self-learning module in mathematics, exemplifying the use of the direct instruction approach to teaching. Okay, so for example, and I'm sure you're familiar with this already, no? Kasi ano ba yung direct instruction or explicit instruction, di ba? I do, we do, and you do. So if there's a module lang na may hawak ka, definitely kailangan ma-model sa bata dun sa first resource na yun, ano yung gusto mong ituro sa kanya. And the model has to be very clear to them. So for example, here in this page, there are figures to represent. So merong picture sa avocado, set black and white yan. At least mukha siyang avocado talaga, sa mangoes. And then representation as a model using blocks or using squares. Okay? Then you have this guide statement here, or beginning statement mathematical statement representing this situation, and also this, and also this. Okay? So pagdating sa example, dapat ma-model yun na based on the first example, the succeeding example must also be patterned to that one. Okay? And again, this will depend on the nature of your learning area. In our case in mathematics, this is warranted, this is necessary. Kasi nga, para sa mga succeeding na mga tasks, makita nila na, okay, this is how I can do it given these examples na meron ako. So the formative assessment move or technique applied here is the use of multiple examples to allow comparison. Unfortunately, I have seen some materials developed last year. Sorry, I think someone opened her mic. Okay, thank you. Again, this is one of the formative assessments na techniques. You have to use multiple examples. And I've seen in some materials na there's one main example. Let's say ito is a left. There's one there's one main example. And then there's just one or two examples na nag-follow. And then practice na agad. Ang question ko dyan is, because I will not judge that certain material, but yung question kasi dyan na ibabato ko sa inyo, kung may gano'n na experience, or if you were able to see a material na gano'n, kailan mapaisip kayo, how will this be helpful for my students if there's only 3 examples? And if these 3 examples are just the same, okay? Take note, we have what we call the concept of variation. Notice that here, oh, sige, yung first example looks similar, looks the same with the main example. But I changed the situation. Right? Again, because this is an example, kailangan makita nila how this is related to the main example, but they must also realize how this is different from the first example, if there's any difference at all. Hindi pwede na one main example and then all the other 10 examples, kunwari, are just the same with the first example. So pag nagbigay ka ngayon ng task na may ibang, na iba siya ng konti, what do you think will happen? Definitely, the students will get confused. Even the parents will not know what to do. So you have to plan very carefully the kinds of examples that you have to provide. Kailangan planado din yun. Anong elements dapat ang pagawin ko dito sa next example? Ano namang element yung kailangan kong tanggalin at papalitan ko naman in this next example? And the next, and the next, and the next. That's how your thinking should be, no? When you design the learning activity sheet. Or even if there's a design sheet already, no? You have to think about how to implement this, so how to help your students understand the flow of these things in these resources, right? So this is the I do stage. How about the we do stage, guided practice? Remember, di ba pag we do, guided siya. Sunod pa rin yung assistant si teacher. Pero sa classroom yun, no? sa physical classroom. E paano nga kung purely modular? Possible pa rin ba na may guided, na pwede pa rin ba yung we do stage? Yes. So here, as you can see, this is similar, itong number 1 task natin, is similar to the way the example sa previous slide natin was designed. Diba? So again, balik natin yung first example. Here's your first example. Okay? Here's your main example actually. Here's an additional example. And then look at the next one, so we do. It's the same, correct? Ano lang ang difference? Or similar pala. They are similar, right? Ano lang ang difference? May mga blanks na. So, parang itong part na to, nandiyan si teacher pa din, na binibigay sa students yung mathematical statement, may blank. Kasi ang masasagot ng blank na yun, sino? Yung student. So you're doing this together pa din, no? So kahit hindi mo kausap yung bata, no, at that very moment, ang kumakausap sa bata yung lesson mismo na nasa papel, no? Dun sa module na yun. You are still guiding your students, no? And from Vygotski's perspective, this is what we call examples. Okay? Dito pa lang sa unang mga examples, in-set mo na yung scaffold already. Papunta dito sa V2 stage. Okay? Para pagdating sa you do sa independent practice, and when you give them open-ended tasks like this one, no? Draw a model to compare the volume, blah, blah, blah. So, iba na yung context, correct? But, meron sila ngayong pupuntahan ng mga examples na applicable to this task. Okay? Now, once they are assuming na master nila yung competency sa previous na mga tasks, then they should not be able to experience any difficulties in the you-do stage, in the independent practice. Okay, I hope you're able to follow my flow. Extended for a few more minutes, but I hope you're getting what I mean, and I hope this is helpful to everyone. Okay, and so what formative assessment strategy are we actually using here? Well, obviously, we're eliciting useful evidences of learning. Okay. Even in the we do stage, kasi dito pa lang, pag nagkamali na yung bata, kahit na may mga prompt, kahit may mga scaffold, ibig sabihin, hindi ka naintindihan dun sa I do stage pa lang. It may be a problem dun sa material mismo, or kulang talaga sa foundations yung bata. So, kulang sa foundations, what are we going to do about it? Okay? How can we diagnose other difficulties ng bata about it? It might be because of the foundations to sa topic na yun, or it might, or baka naman yun, baka some sort of special educational need na talaga na kailangan ma-address sa part of students. Okay? Because we also have those in mathematics, so, and even in the other learning areas, right? So this is the we do, and then the you do. Okay? So what I try to show you in the last few minutes, in the last few slides, is how we can design such learning experiences even when we only have these resources. No? But please take note that by using the I do, we do, you do sequence does not automatically equate that you are using formative assessment. Again, you have to make sure that when you design the learning experiences or the learning sequence or the instructional activities, no, naka-embed doon yung mga scaffolds which will allow formative assessment to happen. Okay, so hindi automatic yun. Dapat, nagkaano naman ako, I do you, we do you do sa mga lessons ko eh. So I'm doing formative assessment pala, no? No, it's not automatic. Okay, there are other elements that should be in place. It should be, again, you refer to the order number 31, you'll see there the list of formative assessment strategies that you should be able to apply. Okay, so to scaffold, you must be able to assess their current knowledge and experience, relate the content to what they already know, understand, and can do. Okay, previously, it's also important for them to relate what they are learning to the future na aralin nila. Then break the task into more manageable tasks with opportunities for feedback, use verbal cues and prompts, and there should be another one here. I think that's the last one. Yeah, sorry. And use verbal cues and prompts. And what I showed you kanina, no, those are examples of verbal cues, no? Written form nga lang. Prompts nga na meron. So, from a Vygotskian perspective, if you really want to apply a constructivist approach to teaching and learning via your self-learning modules and learning activity sheets, then your scaffolding, your prompts must be very well in place in the things you design for your students. Okay. Principle number 3, and again, just to summarize the principles, when you do formative assessment, it doesn't only happen one time, no? It has to happen multiple times within lessons and between lessons. Okay, it should involve interpreting of the results and the subsequent adjustment based on the results. Okay, so this is when formative assessment happens all throughout, before, during, and after instruction, so that when they go now or when they reach the summative assessment, they have already, well, hopefully they have already mastered the necessary competency for them to be successful in the summative assessment. Kaya problematic yun nga eh. So bigyan ng module, tapos lahat ng yun, i-consider mo summative assessment. It will defeat the purpose already of identifying the necessary steps for your children. Kasi nga paano pa hindi pa siya na-master ng certain content. At hindi pa siya ready for the summative assessment. That will be very unfair for your children. Okay? Okay, so two other related concepts for thinking principle number 3 is differentiation. Okay, and I think I mentioned that in this very briefly kanina. You have to differentiate your activities, and this is very crucial in the multi-grade classroom because if you're handling 3 grade levels in the same class, you have to differentiate them according to content, process, or even the product, right? There's also the debate between quantity or quality. Okay, as a designer of assessment experiences, ano bang important para sa iyo? Quantity lang ba? Or yung quality ng mga assessment tasks? Usually, I get the question na, Sir, ilang questions po ba dapat ang ilagay sa isang formative assessment? Gusto ko po multiple choice eh, pero ilan po bang questions? Sir, gusto ko po ng ganitong klaseng task. Ilang questions po kaya under this task? I get a lot of these questions. And I think simple answer to that, no? It doesn't matter how many. Okay, what's crucial, what matters really is the quality. Okay, so even if you have only one performance task, okay, kung magandang pagkakagawa mo doon and talagang planado mo mabuti, ano yung klase ng information na kukunin mo from your students to indicate whether na-acquire nila yung dapat na mastery na na-expect mo from them, then okay lang na isa lang. Kasi even if you have a 50-item test, and all of those items are easy in nature, how will you know which students are actually struggling and which items are the students actually struggling with, diba? If all the items are difficult naman, how would you know that the students are have actually learned kung lahat sila bumagsak kasi sobrang hirap ng test mo na yan. Diba? So again, it doesn't matter. Although meron talagang mga guidelines na number of tasks, no? And may value talaga na may number, no? Kasi we are considering the time that they should be able to finish certain tasks. But at the end of the day, mas mahalaga for me yung quality. Okay? Are we measuring the right aspects of learning? Okay? If yes, to what extent? Okay? What framework are we using to assess our students? So these are just some of the questions that you need to be asking of yourself in assessing. Okay? I'm just gonna skip this. Yeah, so I'm just gonna emphasize that here again, as an instructional design principle, variation points to differentiation. Okay? So when we talk about differentiating activities, whether instructional or assessment, yung purpose ng mga activities na yun, you have to vary your activities. You have to vary your tasks. Okay? Just like what you're seeing here on your left. Task 1 and task 2 are measuring the same thing, which is the concept of 1/4, but they are designed differently. One is convergent, meaning close siya, isa lang yung answer. The other one is divergent. Okay? And so to help you with this, you will have to use Bloom's taxonomy, diba? From remember to create, to remind you of the different levels of performance. Okay? So that they are, just to connect, so that they are ready for whatever additional activities you will give them in the module, no? Whether it's for reinforcement, or for remediation rather, or for reinforcement, or for enhancement or extension, right? And then principle number 4, I think I was able to mention this kanina, that assessment should be a shared responsibility among teachers, learners, and their families. So, I'm just gonna emphasize here lang yung role nung nitong mga stakeholders na to monitor learning progress. So, again, learners should be able to assess themselves every day if possible. Then if age nila, if you have younger children, then they need the help of their parents or even the teacher, no? So there are some questions here. Again, you just have to refer to DepEd order number 31 for this. And then in the same DepEd order, you will see there the classroom assessment resource book where you can find many examples, including this one, no, for self-reflection. Okay? Kasi sabi ko sa inyo, you have to vary your assessment task. And kung nahirapan kayo maghanap ng resource, well, you have DepEd number 31. Okay? Kung browse nyo lang yun, hanapin nyo itong book na yan, naka-attach yun doon, and you'll see there a lot of resources. Again, nalulungkot lang ako, no, pagka usapang DepEd Order 31, no, ang dami rin sabi sa akin na, pag tinanong ko sila, have you read DepEd Order 31? They say yes. And then pag tinanong ko, have you seen the card, itong book? Sabi nila, no. Pinisip ko, if they have read the policy, how come they have not seen the card? So baka binabasa lang yung front matter lang or something. So I hope you take some time to go through the other pages. So punta kayo sa gitna ng policy and hindi sa dulo para makita niyo yung napakaraming examples na pwede niyo gamitin in your class. Whether it's face-to-face or you're doing an online class, whatever learning modality, this is going to be useful for you. Okay, you get a lot of information from this. Okay, and then you also have your self-monitoring tool for the parents. Okay, and for the teachers. And of course, when you provide feedback, there are a lot of questions na pwede mong gamitin at the back of your mind. No, pwede ka isipin ng questions to train your thinking. No, when you provide feedback to the parents and the children. Okay. Again, this diagram can be found in DepEd order number 30. Okay. And then lastly, assessment and grading should have a positive impact on learning. Take note that while assessment and grading may mean differently, they pursue different actions, still there's a way for grading to have a positive impact that will, of course, jive with your assessment practices. No? And Brookhart actually have recommendations for improving your assessment and grading practice during this pandemic. Number one, assign grades that report learners' current achievements of clear learning goals. This might be challenging if you're handling a multi-grade class, but I think this is more relevant for a multi-grade class. Actually, it's relevant for all classes, regardless of what class you're handling or ability level you're handling. But I think this needs to be emphasized in a multi-grade class because kasi nga magkakaiba yung grade level sila, no? And magkakaiba rin yung maturity level sila, no? Saka yung ano nila, yung developmental level. So, it would be good if there's a way for you to identify their current achievement, so based on their performance sa mga sinasagutan nila. And then use flexible timing for collection of evidence of learning. Don't be strict with the deadline. Ito nga, academic piece meron tayo. Consider grade as temporary, subject to revision as more recent evidence becomes available. Please take note that when I say grades, these are not just grades na lumalabas sa card, ha? Kasi ba napapaisip kayo, ha? Pwede bang temporary lang ang grade na nasa card na yun? When you say grades, we're also referring to, of course, we put on the LAS, for example, or the self-learning module, or whatever na pinapasagot natin sa kanila. So, scores or marks, these are also forms of grades. Okay? So they represent, these are quantitative information that represent performance. Right? Then use multiple measures for each learning goal. Again, variation. So, huwag yung gagamit ng puro multiple choice. Gumamit din kayo ng open-ended task. Pwede kayong gumamit ng, open-ended na written task. You can also use performance tasks as long as there are a variety of strategies that you're able to use so that pwede mong i-triangulate kung talagang yung performance niya in this task is similar to this output, to this output, to this output. Yun yung malalaman kung yung talagang batang yun ang nagsasagot ng kanilang mga tasks. Okay? Kasi kapag ka nagbabari, kasi isang topic lang, no? Tapos, iniban nyo ng iniban nyo ng mga tasks, may multiple choice, at bigla kayo nag-open-ended. Sa multiple choice, perfect siya. Pagdating sa open-ended, super struggling siya. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Diba? There are many ways to interpret the situation. But at least when you have a variety of evidences, you can determine yung validity and the reliability of the evidences that you're getting. Right? And then increase the use of performance assessments. I already emphasized a while ago. Choose performance tasks that require extended thinking, planning, and application. Again, huwag lang kayo focus lang sa remembering, sa understanding. Based on Bloom's taxonomy, no, wag puro ganun lang. Kailangan yung mga tasks, kahit na pandemic, we have to push them to think outside of the box. So let's say, pakitaan nyo ng data, ng DOH. So kahit na you're handling a grade 4, grade 5 basics class, so mag-combine sila. Dapat maging age neutral, no? Or even grade neutral if possible, yung certain dates na pwede makarelate doon yung grade 5 basic student, no? Kahit na data ng DOH yun on COVID. Mag-iiba lang yun sa tanong na sasagutin nila if possible. Diba? Basta as long as it requires extended thinking and application. No? So given this data, what do you think can a grade 4 student do to help the community address this ganito ganyan, di ba? So yung task mo may be mathematical in nature or scientific in nature. You can also determine the way they communicate in written form. So may English component kayo yun, di ba? So in just one task, makakapag-integrate ka ngayon ng different learning areas, while at the same time addressing the needs also of your children in your multi-grade class. Use criteria and rubrics that indicate achievement of learning goals. Very important that the criteria that you're setting are related to learning, no? Not just yung superficial na mga aspects like submission. Maaga nag-submit, okay, perfect na siya. That is not related to learning at all. Okay? nag-comply lang siya, that's it. So pagka masyadong mataas yung percentage ng timeliness, you're telling the students that this is only, or this is just something that you value. Parang you don't care anymore. So siguro mababa lang yung valuing mo dun sa mismong response nila dun sa task. At mas mahalaga lang sa'yo yung na-meet nila yung deadline. So again, the way we structure these things, the way we give our instructions, can send different messages to our students. Okay? And so here again, I'm showing you a lot of examples that you can see in the classroom assessment resource book. It is just for grade 1. That again, that's for grade 1 English. Here's a grade 4 80 sample with a rubric here. We have here also a grade science example. Okay. So again, you can find the classroom assessment resource book in docket order number 31. I'd also like to let you know that we just started a formative assessment training just this morning for SLM writers based on this professional learning resource developed by the Assessment Curriculum and Technology Research Center in the University of the Philippines. And of course, later on, I will be glad to share with you the whole professional learning resource. Hindi ko namin siya ma-release ngayon because we're just starting with module 1 or part 1 rather, part 1 of the whole resource. Okay? So once we're done with the training, of course, we will be rolling this out to more schools or to all the regions and to more schools, right? So let me just check if I still have anything else. So just to close this session, my apologies for going time. So what are we going? What should we expect, for in post-pandemic schooling, in terms of teaching, learning, and assessment? Well, definitely, we cannot just go back to the classroom, being interested in things na hindi naintindihan ng mga bata. Okay? Because if we're only focused on the things that they miss, then basically we are wearing a deficit hat. Okay? That's a deficit mindset. Okay? What we really need right now is to wear a hat that focuses or presents a growth mindset. Okay? Looking at how we can support all the learners in our classroom, looking at how we can determine what learners need right now. So whether the learner is underperforming or met the expectations or overachieving, they all have their specific learning needs that need to be addressed. So we cannot just focus on, again, what it is, the deficit, but we have to address all the needs of all the types of students. Okay? And so as teachers, because we're talking about learning activity sheets and SLM, self-learning module, kailangan ma-realize nating mga teachers na we are not just there in the classroom. Or we're not just gonna face the students as people or individuals na magre-relay lang ng content na sinasabi sa curriculum guide. We have to see ourselves as designers of learning, designers of learning experiences, to be more exact. Okay? So, kung naisip nyo ngayon, baka na-overwhelm kayo na, kaso nga sir, mahirap talaga, mag-isa lang ako na teacher na ganito. You don't have to see yourself as the lone person working on, that should work on rather, on these things. Okay? You have to take a collaborative approach. But that collaborative approach with your colleagues must take an inquiry, must take an inquiry approach to collaboration. Meaning, you will have to innovate. Okay? You think about how you can innovate, how you can create, or maybe adapt a certain strategy na applicable sa context mo, and then test whether that innovation will work. And after testing, you try to reflect if it actually worked or not. Diba? If not, i-share mo pa rin sa mga co-teachers mo na, ito, tinry ko to, pero hindi nag-work eh. Tingin nyo bakit? Kapag nag-work naman, share mo pa din. Uy, alam niyo ba, may tinry akong ganito, and this actually worked. So, tatanong sila, paano ginawa mo? Paano siya nag-work? Diba? So, magiging pa ngayon? Additional resource for your faculty. na pwede ka makapag-contribute yan ng mga addition na mga strats they might want to adapt also. Okay? So I hope everything that I covered in this session, while gusto ko pa sana to talk about more about many other things about assessment in relation to SLMs and LAS, I hope this session has been productive for everyone, and I hope you're able to get a lot of things from my talk, right? So, so definitely, I'll be very interested in your key takeaways from this session. I believe tatanungin naman kayo later niya ng management kung ano yung matutunan niyo from today. And I'll be interested. I'll be very glad to see your responses later about what you learned in this talk. Right? So, thank you very much. And thank you again for having me. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Sir Joseph, for the discussion and formative assessment. May we call on Sir James for some reminders before we go on lunch break? Sir James, nakamute po kayo. Ian, maybe while waiting for Sir James. You can have the announcement na lang po. Sir James, nakamute po kayo.
Hello, sorry. Hindi ko ma-unmute eh. Okay, so wala na naman tayo, di ba mapalik sila ng 1:30? So, mag-break na lang.
Okay po, we will have our break and we will be returning at 1:30. Wag na po kayong mag-out sa Zoom. Babalik po tayo ng 1:30.